Welcome to the West Virginia Department of Agriculture's Homesteading series. In this series, WVDA planning coordinators collaborate with producers around the state to share the most up-to-date information on food prep, raising livestock, self-sufficient living skills, and much more for homesteading in the Mountain State. Their goal is to help people of all skill levels increase their knowledge for sustainable living or expand their farm business. The business development staff work to grow West Virginia agribusinesses and economy. West Virginia has a vibrant ecosystem of communities, small farms, and innovative organizations that support the agricultural economy. Our team's goal is to reach out with tools and partnerships to make potential businesses aware of the services and support the West Virginia Department of Agriculture and its partners can provide. Additionally, the business development team oversees our West Virginia Grown and Veterans and Heroes to Agriculture programs. WVDA planning coordinators act as local liaisons, coordinators, and facilitators helping develop agriculture projects and assist agribusinesses around the state. They participate in economic and business development efforts while addressing food insecurities and building resiliency in local communities. West Virginia Grown is the state's premier branding program for agriculture products. The West Virginia Grown logo indicates to buyers the product was grown and/or processed with quality ingredients in the Mountain State and that their dollars are going right back into their communities. We also offer marketing opportunities for West Virginia producers through our West Virginia Grown program. This program is free, and members gain access to the West Virginia Grown brand logo for labeling use on any eligible products. If you become a member, you'll be included in our producer database, our West Virginia Grown directory, market bulletin, and social media platforms. The business development team also includes the Veterans and Heroes to Agriculture program staff. Their priority is to provide support to veterans, law enforcement, firefighters, and first responders transitioning into agriculture via education, scholarships, mentorship opportunities, marketing, technical and business development support, and navigating available resources. The program seeks to further promote the development of agricultural industries, products, and marketing opportunities across the state.
Hello, this is Kenny Point, and I'm here at Every Herb Bearing Seed Farm and Apiary. I'm in Calhoun County, West Virginia, and today I'm just going to give you a little tour and overview of the water irrigation and water capture system that I'm using here on the property. And I am in Calhoun County. The area that I'm in is pretty dry in terms of there's not a whole lot of groundwater. A lot of my neighbors are hauling water in to supply their houses, and what I'm doing and what I've been doing since I've been here is catching rainfall to supply the water. My house, there's no well that's connected to the house. There's no city water. The city water stops a couple blocks down the road. Since I've been here, there have been discussions about them extending the city water through this area, but that hasn't happened, and it's been at least 5 years that I've heard people talking about it, but they just, I guess, haven't gotten funding or haven't gotten the resources that they need in order to do that. So right now, people are still doing whatever they can to supply water. For me, when I moved in here, there was a system already set up, and it involves a couple of cisterns. Like right here behind me, you can see the mound there and the two lids at the top there. This is where my cisterns are. There are two 2,200 gallon tanks in there, and they're concrete cisterns, and they're holding the water that supplies the water that goes to the house. There's also a little filter box over there, which when the water comes in, it goes through that filter box before it goes into the cisterns. Now, where I'm catching the water from is the garage right here on the side. You can see the downspout that comes down, and that's running to the ground to where the cistern is. Now, I'm also catching water from the house behind us, and there's a downspout coming down there right on the end of the porch there. That's where it's coming down. It goes into the ground and it runs over to the cistern from there. It might look kind of odd because it looks like the cistern is higher than that point, but the top of that downspout is above the level of where it's going into the cistern, so that does allow the water to get into the cistern. From there, both of the tanks are connected, so that's a total of 4,400 gallons of water that they hold. And from the cistern, there's also a pipe that runs from there back into the house, and it goes into the basement, and that's where the water, it goes from there. There's a pressure tank. There's also a pump down there which moves the water, and it also puts into the plumbing that runs throughout the house. So again, that's everything. There's nothing else to supply the water, you know, everything from the bathroom, the showers, the sinks, every drop of water in the house is coming from the cistern. I do run it through, in the basement there's a 3-stage charcoal filter that everything goes through that filter to start with, and that's in addition to just the filter box out here. But that 3-stage charcoal filter does more of the purification. And after that, any water that I use for cooking or drinking, I still process that even further by running it through a big Berkey filter just to give me some additional security in terms of the quality of the water. And I do, once it goes through that big Berkey, I cook with that, I drink that. The other, you know, without just going through the 3-stage charcoal filter, I use all that for showering and for the plumbing, the toilet, all that. But you know, it's worked fine for me. I have not had any issues. I've not run low on water. I've had plenty of water for my uses. And the other thing, which we'll go and look at next, is out in the garden area, the irrigation. That was my biggest concern in terms of the water moving here was, well, how am I going to grow crops? You know, if I don't have water, if I don't have a well, if I don't have, you know, some type of water source that I can depend on. So I'll show you what I set up out there. We're back out in the garden area now, and as I was mentioning before, this was the biggest concern that I had moving out here was, if I'm going to farm, if I'm going to grow crops, how am I going to do it without water? And for the first couple of seasons I was here, it was, I shouldn't say it was a struggle, but I just didn't have water out here. I still grew crops, I was still getting decent production, but anything that I watered out in here, I was just using watering cans and hauling water. I had one rain barrel here in the garden. There's another tank up closer to the house, which I'll show you later. But I was just going from there, carrying like 2 and 3 gallon water buckets or containers and bringing it out here to water anything that was out here. Other than that, I just had to depend on the rain. And it worked, but now it's so much better that I have an irrigation system set up. And there are a couple of things. If you see back here, there's a tank that holds 2,500 gallons of water. And then over here on the side, I have 2 tanks set up, and they each hold 1,500 gallons of water. So that's made a huge difference for me. Now I can just go and turn on a faucet and get water out here. You know, all these tanks are connected. Like the big tank, there's a water line that runs underground. It runs along the side of the high tunnel, and it connects to the 2 smaller tanks. The 2 smaller tanks, those are connected to each other. So I can move water from the big tank to the smaller tanks at any time that I need to. And for the big tank, I'm catching water from the equipment building up there. For the 2 smaller tanks, you'll see there's a gutter system on the side of the high tunnels. So I'm catching water off of those gutters, and that's going into the 2 smaller tanks. So that gives me plenty of water, gives me water for the high tunnels, the crops that are growing inside there, and also gives me water that I can irrigate things out here in the field as I need to. Now, we'll take a look inside of one of the high tunnels also, and I'll show you how it's set up there. But in the equipment building, there's also a pump set up with a pressure tank. That's what enables me to move the water from the big tank down here to the 2 smaller tanks. Okay, we're out here where the big tank is. I just wanted to give you a closer view of that, and also point out that here there's a frost-proof or freeze-proof water hydrant that's connected to the big tank. And also over there close to the ground there, you'll see there's a small, this is not powered at all, but it's just from the water pressure. I can operate this, and I keep that on year round. I haven't had any issue with it. The pump and pressure tank that's inside this building, I took that out last fall just because I didn't want that freezing in there. So I moved that into the basement, and I'll set that out in another couple of weeks or so. This tank, this is the outlet where the water is moving out of the tank and is going to the pump, and then from there I can move it. I can utilize the hydrant, or I can push water over to the tanks over by the high tunnels. Also right here, this is the overflow. If this tank fills up, the water will divert. It'll just go out of there, and the pipe runs from here outside of the garden area. Other than that, it's just the downspout that's connecting or catching the water off of the roof here, and that just goes right into the top of the tank there. Okay, we're here closer to the two small tanks. Again, these are each 1,500 gallons. And I just wanted to show you that this is the line running from the big tank out there. So if I move water into these two tanks, it's gonna come out, it's gonna go in through this line. This is the line that supplies the greenhouse, and it goes to the pump and the pressure tank in there. And this is the overflow. These two tanks are connected, so the overflow only need to worry about one side. And the same with filling, because if I fill this tank is going to fill also, because the two are connected down below. So that'll, move water up into both of the tanks. And that's how this works out here. You can see the gutters, how they're just going into the tank. Now we're inside of one of the high tunnels, and this is the high tunnel where I have there's a pump and a pressure tank set up here. And that's what I'm using to move water that's coming from the two tanks outside. And I can put that up to, there's another freeze-proof water hydrant at the end of the high tunnel up there. So that the pump will move the water up there, and from there I can either use the hose or I can use the drip lines to irrigate crops that are in this tunnel. So I had kind of set this box up. I was going to use that in the winter to try to help insulate that, and I was going to put a small heater in there. So I'm still sorting through some things like that. I did not have an issue this winter with anything freezing and causing any damage, but I'm still trying to do things, develop things to just improve and make things safer in terms of keeping them, things like that. Because I want to be able to use that in the fall, because I have crops in here that are growing, and I keep growing them into the winter. So I don't want to not have any water at all. So things like that I'm still trying to sort out and develop the best processes to use them. And I just also wanted to share some of my other systems here on the property. Right here, there is a well on the property, but the volume of the water production is not something like I could hook this up to the house and it would supply enough water for the house. The previous owners did use this for their cooking and drinking water. They would pump water out using the hand pump. You can see there, to operate it, you just crank that pump up and down, and that would, pull the water up out of the ground, and it would come out. And it's, again, sufficient for your drinking water, for emergency uses, for cooking, but you still have to filter it, because it is, I know sometimes you'll see even a rust kind of color to the water itself that will get filtered out. One of the other things, I catch water anywhere that I can. Up here, you can see there's a tank, I guess that's like 500 and some gallons, but I'm catching water off of the workshop there. And there are other places where I set up rain barrels just to get water, and also having in locations so I don't have to carry water that far into some of the other buildings or sheds or whatever it is, or just to have as a backup. There are a couple other things down in the holler. There is a creek down there. There's a spring down there, and there are other springs on the property, but just they're kind of remote, and the issue would be to get the water from down there to up here. The original home site was down in that area, but they moved it up here at some point. So now, I don't know, I think in part they moved it because it did flood down there sometimes. So that's just to give you a sense of some of the other systems that I have and opportunities for collecting water here. And just some closing thoughts. One thing I want to put out there is that, as with most things, if you're living in the country, you want to conserve your resources. Water is one of those things you want to be careful with, you want to conserve, and you want to catch as much as you can. But, you just also definitely, want to be thinking about how you're using the water in ways that you can manage and save water, whether it's through, water efficient plumbing, toilets, sinks, things like that. But it's just so important that you utilize every drop that you have and that you make that water go as far as you can.